Hey everybody, welcome to the Infowise webinar for expense reports. My name is Garrett Curtis. I am a solutions developer with Infowise Solutions. Basically what that means is I use the product to try to develop new business products and things like that for our customers. I do training and things like that. So I'm so glad you could join us. Today, as I mentioned, that we are going to be talking about expense reports. So let's get this thing started here. All right, I think you guys can see my screen now. Okay, so like I said, we are Infowise Solutions, and what we have is a tool that lets you extend SharePoint to do a lot more than it can do out of the box. And the big benefit of our tool is that you don't need to do any custom coding. Everything that we're going to show you is done through the browser. It's just simple logic-based. There's nothing really advanced here. But before we get started, I want to have a couple of reminders here. So first off, after the webinar, there will be a survey for you guys to fill out. I really appreciate you doing it. It's very simple, just 2 questions, just to help us sort of get these webinars more tailored to what you guys are looking for. As we go through, I'll be pausing for questions at a few different times. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have at any time using the questions option on the webinar tools, and I'll be happy to answer those. And then also finally, I'd like to shout out to the SharePoint TechCon in San Francisco, December 5th through 8th. We're going to have a booth there, and if you would like to join us, there are discount tickets available through our website's blog, which I'll show you at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's get this thing started. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about an expense report process. And of course, this is very near and dear to my heart because this is how you end up getting paid. It's a pretty simple process. Really, we just start with sort of the receipts, the spends that you might do, and then we're going to take those and put those into SharePoint using Infowise Solutions. And then finally, we're going to set up an approval process so that, of course, you can get paid. That's great. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing in the next half hour. So for the first section, we're going to focus on mostly user interface things. We're going to show you sort of the advanced Infowise tabs rather than the normal SharePoint list. It's very easy to set that stuff up. We're going to actually add some things like connected lists, which I'll explain in a little bit. Also, we're going to be working on an approval system. So this is a method for managers to sort of sign off on an expense report. We actually have a nice signature field in Infowise that you can use to do the signatures. And then we're going to set up some actions so that as soon as the manager signs it, it's marked approved and the system knows that it's ready to go. And then finally, we're going to set up some smart email alerts. Rather than using SharePoint's default email alerts, which doesn't give you very much power, our email alerts let you sort of tailor the alerts. So for example, in this case, as soon as the requester submits the expense report, we're going to send an email to the manager, and then when the manager approves or rejects the report, we'll send an email back to the requester to let them know that's happened. And so this way we don't have emails going out to everybody, it's just a very tailored approach. And then finally we're going to do some custom branding, which you can use to sort of tailor the Infowise product more toward your business. All right, so let's get started. So here I'm in Office 365 on SharePoint. Everything that I'm going to show you here works in Office 365 using an app. It also works on premises as well. So it doesn't really matter which version you're using. Everything that you'll see here is going to work for you. Okay, so let's get started. I've actually built a few lists in here. Let's take a look at them to show you what I've done. So far, everything I've done to set up has just been basic SharePoint. So if we take a look at, this is the main expense report, we've got a submitter field, which is just a people picker there. I have a department lookup, which is based on a department list. So there's just some basic departments in there. One key thing here is that my lookup list also has a manager. That way, when the user selects the department, we know which manager should be signing off on that expense report. We have a simple description field, approval status, comments, approval date, and then a submit button just to tell the system that we're ready to submit. So that's the basic expense report. we also have line items. If you imagine an expense report, we're going to fill out the report, of course, but we're also going to have to add individual lines to it. So this is things like, what did we spend the money on, what category was it, when, and then how much money did we spend. And so, of course, these are all just basic out-of-the-box SharePoint fields. Nothing's fancy here yet. Okay, so let's get started. What I'd like to do is connect the line items list to the expense report list. That way, when we start a new expense report, we can add multiple line items to it without having to jump back and forth between the two lists. In order to do that, I'm going to go over to List Settings and then go to this Design button. Now, this is a button that gets added with the Infowise app. So unless you have Infowise installed, you won't see this. There we go. And this is just an overview, sort of a dashboard for all the different parts that Infowise brings to the table. But we're just going to focus on a few small ones for now. First off, we are going to set up a custom column. So these are some extra columns that Infowise adds to SharePoint. And like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to associate the line items list to the expense report list. So that's pretty easy here. I'm going to make a new column called line items, and we're going to associate it to the line items list. Now, in order for this to work, I had to do a little bit of advanced work on the line items list. I'll just show you what I did real quick here. So if I went into list settings for the line items list, you'll see that I changed the content type to the Infowise associated item content type. And this is very easy to do. I basically just have to go to advanced settings, turn on management of content types, and then this content types window will show up, and then I can just add the Infowise associated item content type from the list here. I can just pick Infowise and move over the content type. And then once I've done that, now I'm allowed to link it using the associated items report. So here we go. I've got the line items, Infowise associated items. What I'd like to do here is enter items using a grid. You'll see what that means later. I'd like to be able to add new values, and that's all I have to do. So I'll create that column. Completed. Very good. So now what we have is, if I go to make a new item here, we'll see that I actually have line items set up there. So right from the screen, I can already add line items straight to the expense report list. One more thing I'm going to do is create a summary field. What this is going to do is total up all the amounts so that I have a sum total on my expense report. Same thing, sum total. Now it's going to ask me which associated item, line items, I want to take the amount, and I want to sum all of those values. If I wanted to, I could add filters, but we don't need to do that here. Great. Okay, so that's completed successfully. So now if I refresh this, I should also have a sum total field. And as I add amounts, we'll get the sum total there in a minute. Okay, and so next up, I'd like to set up a we'll call it a tabbed interface. So rather than this SharePoint long list like this, what I'd like to do is sort of separate things out into reasonable areas. So all my approval information doesn't need to be nested in the middle of all these other fields. I'd like to sort of split it off into an approval section. So we're going to do that using the Infowise Tabs and Permissions option. Okay, so we're going to make a new tab called Details. And on the Details tab, we're just going to add simple things like the, let's see here. So we'll have the submitter, we'll have the report description, we'll have the department, we'll add that line items field we created, the sum total field, and at the very bottom, we'll create a field called Submit. Okay, great. So that's our basic Details tab. Now we're going to add another one called Approval. Oh, A-P-R-O-V, there we go. On approval, we're going to put all the approval information. So we're going to put the approval comments, the approval date, the approval status. Very good. Okay, so simple as that. I just have to save this now. That might take a second. Very good. Okay, so now that, no, it's not quite saved yet. There we go. So now that it's been saved, if I refresh this, I'll see the new tabbed interface. Very good. Okay, so on the Details tab, I have all of the things that I might need to fill out if I'm submitting a report. And then on the Approvals tab, I have all of the things that the manager is going to have to do to approve the report. So you can see it's pretty simple to set that up. There is one more thing I'd like to do here. So if you go to the expense report, there's a field here called Report ID. And what this is supposed to be is basically just a numerical number to tell us what report that we're looking at. And rather than having the user type in sort of, expense report 0001, 0002, we have a tool called item IDs, which allows us to sort of automatically do that for you. So we're going to set the report ID column to just be a very simple numerator here. And we'd like to say, okay, so we're going to do er.number, and we're going to start that at 1,000. There we go. Okay, good. So simple as that. Now, as soon as we create an expense report, it's going to start at number 1,000. The next one will be 1,001, 1,002, so on and so forth. So let's see that in action. We'll create a report here. Of course, I'm the submitter. Example 1. Pick a department. Let's add a line item here. So let's say this was on the 15th, and I went to lunch. Category meals, very good, and that was $10. Great, so we've got our amount, we've got our subtotal. If we save that, we'll see that this set it up as report number 1,000, and if I created a new one, example 2, if I set this up as, let's see here, let's say that was the 20th, which is not quite here yet, it's fine. 2016, I might have to use this after all. Oh, there we go. Okay, details here, I don't know, I had dinner, another meal, that was $20. Great, so let's save that one. And there you can see that my report ID is automatically incrementing. Cool. So that's everything I wanted to show you in the first section of this webinar. I'd love to answer any questions you have about what I've done so far. Please feel free to answer or to ask them in the questions box. Okay, so some things I'd like to cover here for questions. First off, so far we don't really have a good way to add documents to the system. There's a couple ways to do that. We could use the attachments feature in SharePoint just to attach files. Or, like I created that associated line items, we could also create an associated document library, maybe called receipts, and then set up that so that right from the form, you'll see line items, you'll see receipts, and then you can just hit add, 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 and add them right from there. So that's one way to handle documents with this sort of system. Let's see, another question. The submitter here, I had to type that in myself every time, but usually the submitter is going to be the person using the system. So what is a good way to automatically fill that out? Good question. There's a few ways to do that. One of the ways that I would suggest is using our default value option. So with this, basically we can say that the submitter should be basically the current user. There we go. We're going to add that one. Very good. Okay, so once I've done that and saved it, there we are. Great. So now as soon as I create a new report, it's going to pre-fill the, it's going to pre-fill my name in there. So that's a cool way to do it. And of course, if it's not me, I can always change it later. So that's a neat tool we have. Let's see, another question. How do you secure the form so that individuals can only see their own expense reports? Of course, there's two ways to do this. We could use the SharePoint security, which is sort of out of the box, or we could set up some item level permissions to only show items that have me as the requester, or as the manager I get to see everything kind of thing. So if we have some time at the end, I'll show you guys how to set that up. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, moving on to section 2. So this is going to be focusing on the approvals area. So what we can see here is we've got sort of a basic way to set up the details of the expense report, but now I want to have an option for the manager to sort of sign off on it and to either approve or reject it. Of course, we could just have the manager say, yeah, it's approved, and then fill out the approval status, but it's kind of a hard way to do it. A better way is using one of our custom fields down here called signature. What this lets us do, manager, is basically right from the browser, use our mouse or a pen to sign the manager signature. It's a pretty nice visual way to sign things off. Additionally, the signature field can be set up to watch these other fields. So after the manager signs it, if any of these fields change, it will automatically invalidate the signature. Basically saying, yeah, you signed the document then, but now it's changed, and so you'll have to go in and re-sign it. So that's a nice little feature of the signature field. Okay, so we're going to create the signature field. And since it's been created now, we have to add it back into the tabs. So let's go back up to the tabs and tab permissions, and I'd like it to be on the approval tab. There we go, and then we'll just add manager signature up to the top there. Cool, okay, so some other things that we can do with this. What I'd like to do is have it set up so only the correct manager is allowed to fill out the approval. Because if I'm just some employee, I'm not really supposed to be able to go ahead and approve my own expense report. So in order to do that, we're going to use tab permissions to sort of lock out the approval tab to only be the manager. And if you remember right, the manager is linked to the department through that lookup list. So, for example, I'm the manager in this fake R&D department. So what we're going to do here is go to tab permissions, which is in the same area as the tabs. We're going to go down to tab permissions. And so we'll select approval. And now what I'd like to do is set it up so it is read-only for everybody. And that is sort of the default permission. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. So we've got a read-only in all the forms, and that's just the default. So now I want to make it writable in the edit form for people who are in the that department manager. So from here, since I have it set up as a lookup, I can say department and then manager, which lines up to department and then manager there. Okay, so this is going to be writable for the department manager. Very good. And then really one more thing, when we're creating a report for the first time, we don't really want to see the approval tab at all because never is the first person who touches it going to be approving it. So we can actually do something to hide that. So on the new form, we can actually hide the tab completely. Let's go ahead and add that too. So it's going to be hidden on new, writable if you're the department manager, and then readable otherwise. So why don't we actually go into the readable one and turn off the new form. That way we've hidden it on new. So let's test this out and see what this looks like. Alright, so there we go, I've got that set up. Let's go ahead and create a new item and see what we've got. Great, so what we can see here is straight up out of the box, we don't have the approval tab because we hid it for the new form. Go ahead and make a new report here. We'll say this is a training expense. And I don't really have to fill out any of the other expense stuff. So we'll save that just to show you what happens. So now that that's been created in the system, if I go back into it, we'll see that the approval tab shows up now because we are in the edit form. But of course, since I'm not the manager of this department, I'm not able to fill out any of the information on the approval tab. So let's see one where I set myself up as the manager. So for R&D, if you remember, I was the department manager. Therefore, I should be able to fill out the approval section. Very good. Okay. Oh, I need to set that up. Okay, so there's the approval section. So this is what it looks like if I am the manager. And here's that signature field we set up. Like I said, I can just use my mouse to easily sign the field. Very good. And then, of course, I can set myself up as a approver with a date, and I can say this has been approved, and I can save it, and there we go. Now the expense has been approved, and we can see that I've signed it. I've got the time that I've signed it. These other two haven't been approved yet. All right, now let's see. So we've set up the security here, we've set up the manager signature field. There's one more thing that we can do to really put this over the top. If you remember right, when I signed this off, I had to manually say, I signed it, I had to say it's approved, I had to put the date in there myself. What we could do is we could automate this. So as soon as somebody signs it off, it actually sets the status to approved for us, and it sets the date in there so that the user doesn't, possibly forget to do those things. And to do that, we're going to use the Infowise actions. Basically, these are just a way to automatically do things in SharePoint without having to explicitly do them every time. So we're going to make a new action that's going to update the item. We're going to call it Manager Approved. This is going to happen when the form is edited. We're going to put a condition in there. So this only happens when the manager signature changes and it is true, which basically tells us when the manager signs it off, we want this action to happen. What we're going to do with the action is set up that approval status to approved, and then we're also going to set the approval date to today. Very simple to do that. Great. And then lastly, we need to limit the item so it only applies to the active item. We don't want to have one manager approving something and have everything in the system be approved. So we're going to limit that to the existing item. Great. So we'll save this action. And now let's go ahead and edit one of these. Great. You might notice that I keep having to remove the submitter. That's because I forgot to set up the default value to only work when we have a new item, not an edit item. That's very easy to change. Update. Very good. Okay, fix that little bug. Okay, so first off I have to change the department to the one that I am the manager so I can edit it. Very good. And then I'll actually sign this off. Oh, a little bit difficult to sign that with my mouse. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and what the action is going to do, it's going to see that I sign this off. And what we'll see here is that the action is going to set the approval date and the approval status to approved, assuming I spelled approved correctly, which I may have messed up. I think I did. Okay, so the approval date was set, but I think I spelled the approved incorrectly on the action, so it didn't set that. But you can see it would have. And that's one way we can use actions to sort of automate the system. Okay, so questions for this section. Here's a good one. So multiple signatures. Let's say we had multiple managers that we wanted to sign off on this. So that's pretty easy. We can set up sort of manager 1, manager 2, manager 3, and then we can set our action up to look for all of those 3 being true. So what that would look like is in the action, basically the condition would be, once this finishes loading, well, it's going to load here for a second, but basically what we're going to set up is multiple conditions to where manager 1, manager 2, and manager 3 all have to equal true before the action happens. So it's pretty easy to set up a very flexible signature field here. Okay, so let's see here. Some other questions. What other options do we have for actions? Good question. If we take a look at our actions, let's go back into actions here. You'll see that we have a few different things you can do with actions. I just updated the list item, which is the one I use the most, but there's a bunch of different things we can do with these actions. Pretty much anything you can think of that you want to have happen in SharePoint, you can do with actions. So it's a really great tool. Okay, so moving on to section 3, which I'd like to call sort of the bonus section. So we covered setting up a basic user interface. We also added the manager approvals, but what we'd like to do here is set up those automatic email alerts so that people know that they have a new expense report in the system that they have to use. So to do that, we're going to go to the Add Alert section, which is also a new button that gets added when you install the Infowise Ultimate Forms product. And then in Add Alert, basically it's another dashboard which lets us manage our email alerts. So we're going to make a new one real quick here. So we'll call this Expense Reports, New submittal, which I didn't spell right. Okay, so for here, basically, we can say who's the report going to go to. So the idea here is that we are sending an email to the manager because a new report has been submitted for them. So again, we're going to do that by going to the department, and then we're going to add the lookup to the manager. So this is going to send the email to the manager, and we're also going to CC the person who submitted it. And so that is the submitter. Very good. You can, of course, set up an email box to send these out from a specific address. We're going to set this up to only send when the submit button changes. So if you remember that submit button from before, basically in the expense report, we have the option to submit this. And so the idea here is that when the user is ready to submit it, maybe they have to, add a few things over a couple days, they hit submit and save, and this is going to send the email to the manager. So what we've done here is set up a condition so that when the submit changes to true, the email will get sent out. And then we can also set up some templates. I actually pre-set up a template here called email to manager, but you can see that's very easy to set up templates. So here's the email to manager template, very easy. Expense report, I give them some information about the report, who submitted it, the description, the total. And then I also give them a link to get to SharePoint, so they can do it from their phone or from their computer without having to go navigate through your SharePoint environment. Great. Okay, so that's our first alert. And so let's test it out here. So we'll make a new report, and we're going to say test email. That's going to go to R&D, and I'm just going to go ahead and submit that right away. So what this will do is send the report out to the manager of the R&D department, which of course I had set up as myself. So I should be getting this report. I can show you guys what that email looked like. That's pretty straightforward. There we go. There's the email. I have, that was the email just telling me that I had created a new report, but I should be getting the email too. All right, so that was how you set up reports. You can see it's pretty easy to set up the submission report. It'd be just as easy to set up a report from the manager saying it's approved or not. What I'd like to show you next is a way to sort of spice this up, if you will. You can see it looks much better than the default SharePoint long list, but it's not very colorful. Maybe you guys have some corporate branding standards that you have to adhere to. So I'm going to show you how to set up some branding with this. Again, that's done through the design form. And then we're going to go back into the tabs and tab permissions. And then we're going to go down to the style section here. So what you can do here is set up styles for like background images, colors, things like that. And if you really wanted to get fancy, you can use CSS to find different parts of the form and customize those with, again, different colors or pictures or things like that. You can see on our blog, if you want some examples of what CSS things you should be using, there's some great examples on the blog. In fact, what you can do, once you set something up that you like, you can actually export that to a file. So for example, here's a file called Expense Report Blue that I'm going to import. And that added a new style to my section here. And you can see that there's a lot of things done. So we set this up once, we exported it, and now in the future, every time I make a new site, I can actually use the same template to apply the same branding. So let's see what all of this did here. I'm just going to save it, which will just take a moment. Okay, and then let's see what happened. Wow, okay, so you can see here it changed the look completely, and this was all just done using a CSS template. You can get this exact one off of our site. You can make your own to share with your colleagues, but you can see you can really dress the site up using these advanced templates. Okay, so for some questions here, here's a good one. Can you use HTML in the email messages? That's a great question. Back in the email settings, I showed you how to make a new template, but of course you can just jump to the source code and you can put your HTML in here. In fact, if we look at a template, you can see that it already just created HTML for me. So you can do anything you want to do in HTML right here and create very dynamic forms however you like. So this works for the emails. It's very nice. Okay, another question, can you use tiered approvals? So for example, if the cost is over a certain amount, can you set up an approval that would work for that? That's pretty easy to do. Basically, we go into our either our action to where we set up that one, the action that automatically approved it. So I could add a condition to this where it approves it with manager 1 if the amount is less than $1,000, or managers 1 and 2 if the amount is over $1,000. And again, I don't have to really do any coding there. I just basically say, and the sum total is greater than, well, let's say less than 1,000. There we go. So now this will be automatically approved if the manager signature is less than 1,000. And I can set up another branch here and say I also need manager signature equals true, and then I can add and over 2,000 kind of thing. So you can see how you can build a very complicated approval system using these very simple tools. It's very straightforward. Okay, so I see I've run out of time here. Thank you guys so much for staying with me for the webinar. A few things before you go. Make sure you fill out that survey for us. It's only 2 questions. It's very straightforward. And then next up, if you go to our website, infowisesolutions.com, you'll see that the Ultimate Forms tool, which you've been seeing, you could actually get a complete free trial. And this works both on-premises all the way back to SharePoint 2010, if you still have that, up to 2016, and then Office 365 is an app. You can install that on your own tenant yourself. It's very straightforward. Once you've done that, you've got 30 days to try all of our tools for free. I think you guys will like what you see. If you want, you can schedule a demo with us, and we'll reach out and set up sort of a web demo so you can see some more features of the tool. Of course, we have a lot of webinars that we've done previously, so if you want to, you can go to our webinar section and see some of the other ones that we've done. We also have a blog sort of showing all the new features. Here's that discount code for SP TechCon if you want to go. Again, it's December 5th through 8th. It's a really great convention. It's all about SharePoint developers. Lots of really cool talks. I think you'll enjoy that if you get a chance. And that's it. So, thank you all so much for joining us. I know that this was a lot of time, and I appreciate your time. This webinar is recorded, and it will be on YouTube, and you can also get to it from our blog section, our webinar section in a little bit. You'll see that actually we have the entry for it here, and after it's done, you'll be able to watch the video just by clicking on it. So look for this in a day or two. We'll get that updated. Very good. Okay, thanks guys. I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Again, this is Garrett Curtis for Infowise Solutions.